Now, many of us may have dreamt or may still dream of being a rock star, a music star, the fame, the fortune, but of course the reality is often far from that. And as documentaries as Framing Britney and Billie Eilish's The World's a Little Blurry have recently exposed, it can also bring with it mental health problems and loneliness. Former Little Mix star Jessie Nelson, she's recently opened up about her eating disorders. Taylor Swift is back in the headlines rebuking Netflix for a sitcom, Ginny and Georgia, for making a sexist joke she says is sexist about her love life degrading hard-working women with outdated attempts at humour. But if you still crave a career in music, are there strategies for survival? Sound Advice is a new handbook for aspiring musicians written by journalist Rhian Jones and PhD researcher Lucy Heyman. They're on the line now. Lucy, I'll say hello to you first. Good morning. How did you come up with the idea for this book?
Good morning, Emma, and thank you so much for having us today. So I was doing a literature review for a PhD, and it became really apparent that there was quite a lot of research that was out there to support classical musicians, but not very much to support anyone in any other musical genre. And at the time of doing the literature review, the UK Music published a survey that suggested that 94% of the albums sold in the UK were non-classical albums. So it suggested that the research was going to a very small proportion of the musicians that actually needed it. So we came up with this idea of actually, well, first of all, I did the literature review for the PhD and found the main topics that we needed to look at. And then I collaborated with Rhian, who actually came up with the idea separately. And we both had the same idea at the same time. So we realized that there was a lot of support that was needed for these kind of musicians, and there was a hole that needed to be plugged.
Rhian, what's it like when you've written for Billboard, Music Week, The Guardian? What are they like, these stars, when you talk to them? And is it not all it's cracked up to be?
So I would caveat that by just saying that my specialism is in the music business. So I tend to speak to a lot of business executives, although I of course also speak to artists and spoke to a lot of artists for the book. So yeah, I think that people will be surprised to learn just how many of the people who look like, on the surface and what we see on social media are just hugely successful and, living happy, wonderful lives, are actually really struggling mentally and emotionally as a result of the challenges that come with being a musician.
And that side of it, I suppose, I'm really intrigued with some of the messages we've got in. If I just read you one from Sophie, because we were asking, would you ever want to be famous? Is that still an ambition? Sophie says, as a young woman, I think most of the children have an idealised view of stardom, mostly view the celebrities as popular, attractive and wealthy, wanting to get into music. The fascination with that is being a perfect person, loved by all, gorgeous. It comes from teenage emotions and social media perpetuating the mindset, not followed up with an understanding of the anonymous. And then there's this scrutiny under the eye of millions, hounded by the media, personal political opinions being used against you. Being famous would be horrible. I know that your book's not trying to say that. It's trying to help people survive who are going through this. But do you get a sense that it's worse than it has been?
I think that there are a lot of specific challenges that come with being in the public eye today as a result of social media. Yes, because it's relentless, it's very direct. In previous years before social media, fans would write letters or be in fan forums, and that's the way they would communicate with the musicians. And today, a musician can have a social media account and they can receive messages and tweets and likes and comments just constantly. So that's really tough because there isn't a filter unless you're lucky enough to have a team to deal with that sort of stuff for you, which a lot of musicians can't afford to have. I think that's the main thing, social media. And there are lots of other things on the business side of music that suggest that today's environment is particularly tough. With the internet comes the increased competition for attention. So it's really hard to get heard, which means that musicians typically have to release more music than they ever have done before. So the work rate is relentless. There's less money earned from the sales of recorded music. So that could mean more time spent on the road, on tour. And as we point out in the book, being on the road, and especially being on the road a lot and without enough breaks in between touring and in between shows, is an incredibly tough lifestyle.
Some insights there that might be different to how you're thinking. to get your take, Lucy, on the biggest issue that people in this industry who are under a microscope, if they do make it, and that's a big part of it, if they make it, because so many don't, is it around mental health? Is that the biggest issue that you think they need more support?
I think we've had a lot of awareness raised recently within music about some of the mental health challenges that musicians face, and that is fantastic. But we also need to look at some of the physical health issues that musicians face. So research suggests that 74% of musicians experience pain when they play, which is a huge percentage. There are significant vocal health issues. There are hearing issues. I spoke to a musician last week who was telling me about how her tinnitus was actually making her suicidal. So I think it's quite difficult to actually separate the mental and physical health issues out from each other, because they're so interlinked. And I think if we want to support musicians in the future overall with their health, we're going to have to look at how we can support them with their physical health needs as well as their mental health needs.